Welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about how nothing is truly ad hoc with Hex and Snowflake. My name's Matt. I'm a product marketing manager at Hex, and this is Sai, who runs a lot of growth over at ClickUp. And we're going to be covering a few different specific use cases at ClickUp where initially they found a really fascinating insight and that able to build an entire dashboard and kind of operational process around that insight, all within Hex. So everything from finding something by exploring the data to building out operational processes. So with that, I'll pass to Sai to start talking about ClickUp.
Of course. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to talk to you about ClickUp's experience using Hex and how Hex basically transformed most of our analytics workflows and made us a much more efficient and an agile analytics organization. So before I jump in, what is ClickUp? If you have not already heard about ClickUp, or if you did not see all of those thousands of billboards that we have across the country, we are the number one project management software. We're in one of the most competitive spaces in the industry, in the tech industry. ClickUp was founded towards the end of the 2010s, 2017, 2018. And ever since, we've grown pretty significantly. We're at 1,000 employees now. We have over 100,000 paying customers. And it's been a great, great journey. What that means is something that we think is very important to our success is we think of our competitive advantage as our ability to out-execute our competitors. And that means not just from a product perspective, but every team at ClickUp, the analytics team, the marketing team, everybody has to out-execute our competitors. And that's one of our competitive advantages. And Matt, do you want to talk about Hex?
Yeah, if you're not familiar, Hex is a platform for secure and collaborative data science and analytics. So if you're familiar with like a Jupyter notebook, we're kind of a souped up version of that with a report builder on top. So again, mapping to the point of this talk, you can go deep with Hex and then you can build shareable asset to give to the rest of your company.
Cool. All right, ad hoc to operationalizing churn. So before I jump in, I have a question for the audience. If we have any data analysts, data engineers here, how many of you get ad hoc questions every day or every week as a part of your regular workflow? Okay, so I'm guessing you pull the data for this ad hoc question, throw that in a Google Sheet or throw that in a CSV or share that information with your users, throw that in a dashboard. And how many times do you get that question again 3, 4, 5 months later? A few of us, yeah. I get that a lot of times. And it is very frustrating, right? I'm like, I knew I ran this analysis a while ago. It was not worth it to build a dashboard, but now I have to rerun the analysis again. I have to find that SQL or that Python script again. So let's jump in. Ad hoc to operationalizing churn. Q3, Q4 2022 was very rough for companies at our stage. We were Series C, we were a startup, we were at a hyper growth. We were growing really quickly, and all of a sudden the market crashed. And it was really important for us to think about efficiency as our primary operating principle. It was not growth at all costs anymore. It's the most efficient way we can grow. And one of the ways we decided to tackle that is to start paying real attention to the churn and contraction problem most businesses face. Is it something that can be solved? Absolutely. If you put in the right mechanisms and frameworks in place, you can actively protect your business's bottom line and protect your business from risk. And as you may imagine, we started getting questions from our executives and our board. They wanted to understand who was churning, why these people are churning, and what can we do to prevent our existing user base from churning so that we can weather the storm. And stakeholders had access to really good BI tools that were out in the market. They could self-serve their own information through dashboards. It was not like we were completely blind to what was happening, but we had a very high-level understanding of what was happening. But that was not enough. That was not an insight deep enough for teams to take meaningful actions that can help us proactively mitigate churn. snapshot of a generic BI tool. And right around that time, I was exploring Hex, and I brought on Hex into ClickUp because Hex solved a really, really important workflow for us. It was, how do we start off with these ad hoc questions that we get? How do we take those ad hoc questions and operationalize them so we don't ask the same questions over and over again? How do we automate the process? How do we make our workflow as an analytics team as efficient as possible so that we're spending our analysts' time on more meaningful things? We started off doing the analysis in Hex. Hex has this really cool notebook where you can write SQL, you can write Python, you can build data frames, you can play with it. You can write for loops in your SQL statements, which is really cool, which I think is what you see there in the beginning. And we wrote the SQL, we started generating insights, and we helped our business understand what was happening. Okay, why are people churning? And, just the basic level of insights. And with ad hoc analysis, we found some really interesting things. We found cohorts and segments of users that are churning significant amount of revenue and had really high churn rates. So if you think about it, there's not a million users. There's a significant number of user segments that we can go target to prevent churn. But what was really important to us was personalizing how we're communicating with these customers, personalizing how we're tackling churn based on the customer segments. And through Hex, we were able to identify these segments of users that were meaningful for us to spend our time and resources on. We only have a finite amount of time and resources, and we decided to spend those resources on customers that were churning not just a lot of revenue, but had high churn rates within their segments. As soon as we found this, we started interventions, and all of this took 2 weeks. We went from asking the questions to deploying our first set of anti-churn programs within 2 weeks. And that was basically one of the insights we found was as users stop using the product, as their stickiness and frequency of product usage decreases, they tend to churn. Not rocket science, but that was one of the first things we decided to target. We wanted to maintain that healthy adoption and healthy usage across all of our accounts. We just did not want to maintain healthy adoption and usage. We want to make sure our customer success teams knew about this. They knew when an account was not seeing healthy usage or adoption, and we wanted to alert them in the right time so that they can go have those one-on-one conversations with our customers and set them on a path for success. But the premise of this entire talk, ad hoc is just the start. The bigger question was, how do we operationalize this? And how do we operationalize this using Hex without having to bring in another BI tool, without having to bring in engineers to operationalize insight to action? We started by creating these really fun interactive dashboards you can build with Hex. This is one of my favorite features of Hex. What you can do with Hex is give your stakeholders the ability to cut data across whatever segments they choose to. So it just does not have to be, I want to look at churn by segment. I want to look at churn by region, which most of your BI tools help you do. But Hex can cut data across all of these segments. So they can choose 2 segments, 4 segments, how many ever segments they wish to, so that our marketing teams, when they're self-serving these insights, they can go really, really deep into each of these areas and understand, how do we personalize our email campaigns for this specific segment of users who have a really high churn rate? And we put this in the hands of everybody in our business. And to get to this point, it took us about 3 weeks. 3 weeks from the day the question was asked to an analysis like this being in the hands of our marketing teams, our customer success teams, and our sales team, so that they could go find customers and actively prevent churn for the business. Which is basically, I know this term is used a lot, but I feel like we truly democratized insights. And it is going beyond what your regular dashboards can do. Your regular dashboards help you filter data, cut data by 1 or 2 dimensions. But true insights is really about segmentation across any business, especially SaaS business. And if you can get insights at a really, really deep level, that'll help you personalize your programs. The more interesting part. We went from our ad hoc analyses, we built this fancy dashboard, but what's the next step? The next step was really using Hex again to bring in our data science teams, get them to build predictive models around churn within Hex. These predictive models are powered off of Snowpark. All of the compute runs in Snowpark. And then we use Hex's write-back functionality to push the data back into our Snowflake warehouse. So by that, what happens is every time a high churn prediction is made, we're able to use Hex to feed the data back into our Snowflake data warehouse and send our CS reps alerts as soon as a high churn prediction is made. So our CS reps could just go and reach out to these customers instead of having to self-serve these insights themselves. So that's the full analytics workflow that Hex is really good at. It lets you do one-off analyses. It lets you convert those analyses into dashboards that anybody can use. But going beyond that, it lets you build ML pipelines and push the data to whatever tool you wish, and so that you don't need people self-serving insights. Everything's pretty much automated. And yeah, I already spoke about this. But before we move on to the next section, any questions, Matt?
Has anybody else kind of dealt with churn before? Show of hands, trying to analyze churn. Yeah, it's traditionally quite a tricky problem. We're proud to really design a tool that allows you to take it from more than just looking into it, trying to get to that alert level. If you don't, then oftentimes people do miss accounts that are going to churn. You got to be proactive in getting that data in front of them. Yeah, does anybody have any questions about analyzing or automating churn insights before we go through the next example?
The question was, once you use that write-back function, do you have dashboard setups that other leaders can self-serve that information? And yes, so we have this dashboard within Hex where we rank all of our accounts based on their likelihood to churn. We give our leaders information on how much is going to churn, how much do we predict is going to churn within the next month or two. What this helps our leaders do is plan their resources and how they want to allocate budget across their teams a lot better. The question was, are there instances where you get the results, but the customer is already churned? How do we handle those instances? I would say that happened very early on when we were still working on deploying the model. The good news is we know when the renewal date is. So our customers usually don't churn because we're a subscription business up until the renewal date. So all of our churn predictions are based on customers with renewal dates 1 or 2 months out. So we can still go and meaningfully make an impact rather than predicting churn on customers who are going to renew next week.
I'm actually curious, what are the typical interventions? Is it discounts? Is it bonus seats?
So it depends, right? ClickUp serves micro, SMB, mid-market, and enterprise. Micro is accounts that are companies that have less than 10 employees, SMB less than 50 or 100 employees. Mid-market enterprise go up to 2,000 and 10,000. And our interventions depend on what the company size is. If it's these smaller accounts, it does not make sense to dedicate a CS rep's time because it's expensive. And for these accounts, we usually use promo codes as interventions. We use email campaigns with webinars that serve about 50 or 100 people. But once you get to that above 200 company size, our deal sizes get to over 10K. And once you're at that level, it's really important to reach out one-to-one and truly understand what's blocking them, what's keeping them from using ClickUp the way we know a company should be using ClickUp. Okay, moving on to the next topic. You know what, I'm going to skip retention. I think let's talk about predicting activation first and then get back to retention. Okay. I think this is another really interesting use case. In an interesting way, we used Hex. So activation is a really, really big topic for most PLG SaaS businesses, right? What is activation? For context, activation is that first aha moment that we talk about. Somebody signs up to use your freemium or free-to-paid product, and it's really important for all of these users to hit that first moment of value realization. And it's really important to understand what this first moment of value realization is. so that your day one new user experience efforts, day two new user experience efforts can be focused on getting users to this point. How do we do that? How do we understand what drives activation? What should that definition of activation be for a business like ClickUp? We start with really simple questions, right? The first step to defining activation for a business that's doing it for the first time is just understand what's highly correlated to retention. If certain actions are highly correlated to retention, we know that accounts that retain perform those actions, so we should get every account to a similar level of usage or engagement with the product. And we did do that. We defined activation based on metrics that we found had really high correlation to retention. But another thing we're really good at ClickUp is experimentation. We run about 30 experiments every single quarter within our product, not even web. And what we found out was just moving or getting users to perform the metrics or the events that we think are highly correlated to retention did not necessarily move retention for us. So our activation metric was, in a way, meaningless. And the next step to that process was, okay, can we understand what metrics are top predictors of retention? And can we use those and define a composite metric in a way that we're taking metrics that we know are really good predictors of somebody retaining? And here's another thing you can do with Hex. You can just not write SQL query or databases on Snowflake. What you can do is you can build data frames using SQL, query your Snowflake data tables, and then build regression models or whatever you want to do using Python on top of it. So we built a very simple regression model with the very simple goal of finding out what these top predictors are for our activation metric. And we found out feature data is masked, but feature 1, feature 2, feature 3, we found out 10 features that are really strong predictors of activation. And we ended up picking features that had a really high coefficient. And we said, okay, if a user performs action 1, 2, and 3 together, this is who we would consider as an activated user. Pro tip. What we found, something that really stuck out to me in this whole process was, I'm pretty sure all of us have heard the magic Facebook 7 friends thing. If you get, if somebody adds 7 friends on Facebook, they're likely to stick on forever. And as an analyst, I've gotten that question multiple times. Everyone's like, what's that magic number for ClickUp? What's that magic number for Unity, Algolia? And what we found out was it did not really matter what the exact number was. What was more important is meaningful engagement with the feature areas you care about the most. And for example, the core feature within ClickUp are tasks and docs. We found out that if you create 5 tasks, 6 tasks, 7 tasks, the strength it had on predicting retention did not necessarily go up as long as you created at least 5 tasks. So next time you're doing this analysis on defining activation, this is something that we came across. And another thing we found out was combining engagement across feature areas was really important. For a product like ClickUp, we have docs, tasks, whiteboards, so we're competing with multiple tools out there in the market. What was really important for us is getting users to touch multiple features so that they truly see the value in our product, and that is how we ended up defining activation. But more importantly, how did we take this and operationalize it? How did we put an analysis like this in the hands of all of our stakeholders? It's pretty easy, actually. So what we did was we built an app where any PM or any marketer could go and pick whatever target variable that they cared about. Your target variable could be retention. Your target variable could be conversion to paid or churn. And then they could select a list of predictors. All of these predictors are segment events that we fire engagement within the product. And Hex automatically runs the analysis on that target variable that you choose based on the predictors that you choose to tell these people or tell our stakeholders what features are top predictors for what they care about. If you think about it, questions like these would need a data scientist or a data analyst to look into this every single time. And we don't need to do that anymore. We've operationalized and we've automated most of these processes so that PMs could just go in and self-serve and truly understand within their product area, what do users do that is a strong predictor of somebody retaining, converting to paid, or churning. Any questions there?
I'll ask a question. So what team was most willing to adopt these operational dashboards and which gave you the most resistance?
Nobody gave us resistance. We were very lucky at ClickUp. ClickUp hired people who really understand data really well. So most teams were in fact really happy that they don't have to go to an analyst, and our analytics resources are pretty constrained to get the answers they need. So we're just helping them do what they need a lot faster. So who uses this? Our product teams use it, the entire growth team uses it, and our marketing team uses it.
Do you have any other advice for folks who are looking into the activation metric area that you didn't bring up so far? Any surprising activities really stuck out? Or
activation did keep me up at night, but what stuck out? Yes, I think communicating. I bring up the Facebook 7 Friends again because it created this notion across SaaS that every business is going to have a metric like that. Every business is going to have that magic bullet where you're going to find this magic bullet and everybody who hits this is going to magically retain. That does not exist. At the end of the day, at all the companies that I've worked for, what we saw is meaningful engagement with the product is what really matters on day one. People really have to engage with your product to see the value right from the first day. Another question that we get quite often as product analysts is, what type of feature engagement drive retention? How does my feature area, how is it driving retention for ClickUp? But more importantly, what was important is to understand what meaningful engagement within each surface area of our product looks like. What does that mean? Why do I keep bringing up meaningful engagement? You could come start using ClickUp on day one and you could create one task, or you could create 5 tasks. What we see is users who create a certain number of tasks or who perform a certain number of actions clearly have a higher retention rate than the users who don't. And so what we're looking for is that inflection point, which is, what is the point of diminishing returns? What is that point of how many times should an action be performed for a user to start using it over and over again, start using the feature area over and over again? So we started off with a very good analysis, right? Like we started off with an odds ratio analysis. We're like, how likely is a user going to retain if they invite a user, if they clear a notification, if they create a task? But this does not really give you any information on frequency of engagement. This does not tell you, okay, do they have to clear a notification 1 time? Do they have to clear a notification 10 times for them to understand how that surface area of our product works? And the way we answered it is using a very simple polynomial regression curve. On your y-axis, you have your retention rate. On your x-axis, you have the number of times an action is performed. What you very clearly see here is there's a point, right? There's a point of diminishing returns, meaning as you perform the action n number of times, your retention rate starts to flatten out at a certain point. We're like, okay, probably that is what we should aim for. And this is how we define some of our KPIs for our product areas, which is if somebody from our inbox team comes and asks us, what does meaningful engagement on day one look like? We're going to point them to this graph and tell them, users who engage with your feature area at least these many number of times on day one or perform these many number of actions, these are the users that are more likely to retain. A very straightforward analysis. We found those inflection points for every feature area within our product. But the more important part was we track about 300 events within the ClickUp product. It's a very broad product. And we serve 7 different product teams. We cannot do this for every single product team. So it was really important for us to take this initial analysis that we did and put this in the hands of our stakeholders so they can self-serve their own analysis. And we did that. So what our users could now do is they could go into Hex, they could select the event that they cared about. For example, If somebody was the PM for tasks, they're like, create comment. How many times does a user have to create a comment within the first 14 days for them to have a really high retention rate? And that's what this app really allows us to do. We took this, we put this in the hands of our product team, in the hands of our email team. And all of these people now could just go in and put in whatever event or whatever feature they cared about. And they had a basic understanding of what meaningful engagement for their area of product looks like. And that's about it.
Yeah, so those are kind of our three examples, talking through churn, retention, and activation.
Thank you.